Welcome back to Eerie Echoes. If this is your first time tuning in, settle in, because tonight we head north. Farther north than most will ever dare to go. Alaska. A land where the nights last for weeks, where the wilderness swallows entire towns, and where the line between reality and legend is buried under snowdrifts 100 feet deep. These aren't campfire tales meant to pass the time. These are the chilling stories that linger in sheriff's files, whispered in bars, and scratched into journals that were never meant to be found. Tonight, I bring you 3 accounts from the frozen frontier, and we begin with the most unsettling of them all, Fairbanks, 1999. I was younger then, and I thought the wilderness was a playground. I'd camped out in Denali, hiked the Wrangles, even snowshoed across tundra that most people only see from a plane window, but nothing prepared me for what I heard that night under the northern lights. There were 4 of us. Me, my college roommate Brian, and 2 girls we knew from the dorms, Rachel and Emily. It was supposed to be harmless fun, a weekend camping trip out by the Chena River just 20 miles out of town. The sky was clear, the air so sharp it felt like glass in your lungs. We set up our tents, built a fire, and waited. That is what you do in Alaska winters. You wait for the sky to do something incredible. And when it does, you feel small, like the earth opened its ceiling just for you. Around midnight, the aurora came. Curtains of green and violet stretched across the stars. We lay on our backs in the snow, our breath steaming, the world so silent that even the crack of a branch sounded like a gunshot. That's when I heard it. At first I thought it was wind, a low, mournful sound, thin and stretched out across the treetops. But it carried something sharp inside it, a note that didn't belong to the air. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. Brian laughed nervously. "It's the wind, man. Relax." But Rachel sat up. Her eyes weren't on us. They were on the sky. "It's coming from up there," she said. Her voice trembled, just a little. "It's screaming." And it was. Not one voice, dozens, layered on top of each other, weaving through the shimmer of the aurora, screams, moans, a chorus of agony pouring down from the lights. We froze. I remember the fire snapping behind us, the crackle of ice beneath my gloves, and those voices bending through the night. It didn't sound human. It didn't sound animal. It sounded like something trapped between the two. Emily started crying. She begged us to pack up, to leave. But when Brian grabbed the lantern and stood, he froze. "What the hell is that?" We turned. At the edge of the trees, just beyond the circle of firelight, something stood. A shape. Tall. Thin. Blacker than the night around it. For a moment I thought it was just a tree, until it moved. It swayed almost rhythmically, in time with the screams. And then, it was gone. Not walked away, not faded into the dark, just gone. We didn't sleep. We huddled around the fire until the first hints of daylight broke. And when we finally had the nerve to pack up, we noticed something on the ice of the riverbank. Burn marks, perfect circles, charred into the frozen surface as if something impossibly hot had touched down. Rachel never came back to campus after that trip. She dropped out a week later. She told us she couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every time she closed her eyes, she said she heard the voices. And the strangest part? She wasn't the only one. Reports trickled in that winter. Hikers, hunters, locals, all claiming they'd heard screams carried on the aurora. Some said they saw shapes dancing in the sky, black figures that moved against the light. I've been back to the Chena River since then, but never at night, and never when the sky is glowing. because I can't forget that sound, the sound of the sky itself screaming. If chilling stories like this keep you listening, don't forget to subscribe. More nights like this await. Some nights hand you wonder and take nothing back. Other nights, they take something from you and keep it. After the Aurora, I stopped looking up for a while, but the next account I'm about to share didn't come from the sky. It came from the snow, quiet, level, and merciless. They called him Daniel Reed, a musher who knew the trail markers by smell, the river bends by the way the wind cut his cheeks. Winter of '82, he loaded a modest sled in Nome, 6 dogs, a battered canvas tent, a brass stove that smoked when you pushed it, and a journal he kept more neatly than most men keep their houses. He wasn't racing, he was training, and Daniel was the kind of person who trained alone. I wasn't a musher. I was the guy they called when someone didn't come home. I volunteered with search and rescue, snow machines, grid maps on clipboards, VHF chatter, thermoses that tasted like coffee and exhaust. When Reed's sister reported him overdue by 2 days, we spun up at first light and pointed our machines toward the frozen interior. You learn, doing this work, to read snow like scripture. Sastrugi tells you which way last week's wind blew. Crusted drifts whisper where the river thins. A tidy line of paw prints means calm dogs. A web of scratches and churned ice means panic. That morning, the trail was so clean it felt rude to cross it. Dog prints in 2 neat rows. Sled runners smooth as pencil lines. Boot prints, 1 man, setting an easy, even pace. We found his first camp late morning, tucked in the lee of a low bluff. The tent was staked. The stove, cold but clean. A pot with a rind of frozen stew still clung to the sides in a half-moon smear. On the floor of the tent, his journal lay open. January 19th. Visibility good. Dogs strong, runners holding. Stopped early to rest team. Heard something in the night. Wind in the ice. Strange harmonics along the river mouth. We'll push east tomorrow. The page ended there. No smear of panic. No scrawl of hurry. If he'd been interrupted, it had the courtesy of a full stop. We pushed on, leapfrogging teams to extend the search grid. Afternoon light here is a rumor. The horizon smolders and then gives up. We were 2 miles past the camp when Tom, riding point, raised a mitten and cut his engine. The silence that follows a kill switch is not silence. It's the world reminding you it's bigger than your noise. Tom swung a gloved hand down. Boot prints again. Dog paws. Sled runners. The story moved forward, but the next mile told a stranger story. The dog prints began to lag, shorter behind the sled, a sign the team had slowed or been held. The boot prints shifted from beside the runners to behind them. We followed the line until it reached a flat, wind-scoured field, a white plate laid over the earth. The dog prints stopped. The sled runners stopped. The boot prints continued. Not much. Maybe a quarter mile. A straight, sober walk into the center of nothing, and then the prints ended. Not drifted over, not blown soft. Ended, as if the next step had no need for snow. We fanned out, 12 men in orange parkas, looking like traffic cones scattered by a giant. Probes sank, came up clean. No hollow beneath, no thin ice. We drew circles on our maps that meant grid, and circles in the snow that meant stubbornness. The radios hissed. The sun smoldered out. We took the line backward, as if the story would be kinder in reverse. 50 yards shy of the vanishing point, I found something that didn't belong. A mitten. Daniel's, palm down, as if set there to hold a page of the world open. 10 yards on, we found a scarf snagged on a thorn of ice. It didn't look torn off. It looked placed. At dusk, we located the sled. The team stood where the runners ended, still in harness, heads low, eyes like wet coals. Dogs talk with their bodies. Panic looks like a fight, and we saw no fight. Someone had secured the brake. Someone had told them to stay. We cut them free, watered them, checked their paws. They leaned into the heat of our machines and watched the empty field. Inside the sled bag, we found his spare parka, a coil of rope, a half bag of fish, and the journal returned to the top. A new entry had been added in a tighter hand. January 20th, heard it again, not wind. Voices along the flat. Dogs felt it first. We'll check the field before night. If you're reading this, I'm sorry I made you come out here. I read it twice, then felt something I never admit over the radio. Anger, not the loud kind. The kind you feel for a man you respect who's about to do something you don't understand. We bivouacked on the bluff. 2-man watches. Dogs staked inside a ring of machines. Headlamps off to let the night reassert itself. I lay there listening to the ice talk. Rivers speak in winter, pops like knuckles. A deep drum you feel in your ribs. A high, glassy ring when the wind brushes a fresh sheet. The field in front of us was old ice, thick and arrogant. It shouldn't sing. Near midnight, the temperature dropped like a verdict. The drum rose, the low boom of shifting plates somewhere under the crust. Then something else braided itself through the sound. At first, I thought I was chasing echoes from another memory. Then Tom sat up like a puppet pulled by a string. "You hear that?" he whispered. I did. Not speech, not melody. A pressure against the air at the edges of hearing like a chorus sung through teeth. The dogs pressed their bodies to the snow, as if hiding would flatten them out of harm's way. I don't believe in the strange because it's entertaining. I believe in it because I've had to make decisions inside it. We did not go onto the field that night. We did not play at Courage. We sat and listened to the river speak nonsense in a voice that made sense to no one. At daybreak, the wind had erased our boot prints, but not Daniel's. The line still led to the white plate and ended with the same impolite finality. We searched 3 more days. We cut the field like a cake, probed until our hands went dumb, brought dogs that knew how to translate air. Nothing. We found, 10 miles east, a strip of cloth caught in a willow, same weave as his spare shirt. How it got there with no trail to lead it, I can't tell you without guessing. When we brought his team back to town, one dog refused to pass a certain bend in the river. He dug his paws into the snow and laid his head down. I sat with him until his breathing leveled. He didn't sleep. He listened. Daniel's sister took the journal. I still have a copy of the last page. I don't show it often. I don't like what it does to a room. Those neat lines, ending with an apology to men like me. The implicit assumption that he was going where we couldn't follow. Some folks insist he fell into a hidden lead, a pocket of black water under white arrogance. Some blame a sudden whiteout, a wandering step, a physics problem that punishes certainty. I could live with that. I could live with the math of loss. What I can live with is the way his prints marched cleanly into the middle of a field that had no intention of letting anything through. When the wind is right and the temperature drops hard enough to make your teeth sing, I hear a pressure in the air that isn't wind. I don't call it voices. I don't call it anything. I just listen until it passes and hope it never stops where my prints do. If stories like this keep you listening through the long night, make sure you subscribe. There are more trails we haven't walked yet, and some we shouldn't. Not every disappearance leaves a single pair of prints in the snow. Sometimes an entire place goes quiet at once. Fires warm, doors unlatched, meals half-eaten, like a hand reached down and lifted people out of their chairs. The last account tonight isn't about one man. It's about a village that decided to stop answering. We didn't go looking for mystery that day. We went looking for elders. A late storm had chewed through power lines and clogged the road with snow boulders the size of cars. A nurse named Helen, a state trooper named Briggs, and me, EMT with a stubborn streak, took a snowcat west along the coast to check on a cluster of homes near an old mining track. It wasn't a full-time village anymore, more like a seasonal community. But in winter, seasonal can turn into forgotten faster than your coffee freezes. The wind along the Bering Sea doesn't blow, it pushes. A white wall on your left, black water on your right, and between a strip of land that doesn't belong to either. We crested a low ridge around noon and saw smoke. "There!" Helen shouted over the engine. "They've got heat!" We bounced down into a shallow basin where a dozen wooden houses huddled like old men. The smoke came from 2 chimneys. Good sign. Then we cut the engine and learned that good signs can be liars. Silence is bigger when you've just turned off a machine. The world expands into the space your noise leaves behind. We expected dogs, laughter, a door. Instead, the wind carried only snow and the smell of fish and smoke. I knocked on the first door. It swung inward on its own. Inside, the air was warm. A stew pot muttered on a wood stove, 2 bowls on the table. Bread torn, not sliced. A chair pushed back just far enough to suggest someone stood quickly. Helen called out names she knew. No answer. She touched the pot with her glove. "Hot," she said, and gave me a look I didn't like. House 2 was the same. House 3 had a radio on, low, whispering a phrase we couldn't make out under the static. In House 4, a pair of boots stood by the door with their laces open and tongues out, as if they'd been set for a hurry that never got its feet into them. Briggs went house to house with the caution of a man who expects the ordinary to be interrupted. He checked for signs of struggle, kicked in thresholds, broken crockery, a careless spill. Nothing. He cupped a hand to the windows of the 2 houses with smoke. No one. The stoves were fed. The wood stack by the door was neat. Whoever lived here had kept their habits even as they left them. "Tracks," I called. We met in the lane between houses where the snow had settled into a polite sheet. Footprints. Not 1 pair, not 2, many. Men, women, small feet that suggested a child or just small boots. All oriented the same way. Out of homes, down the lane, toward the frozen spit where land almost becomes water and then changes its mind. We followed the line through town. No hesitations. No fanning out as if to search. Just a procession. I don't like that word for footprints. It makes people into a ceremony. But that's what it looked like. A quiet ceremony written in snow. As we neared the spit, the wind picked up. A low freight sound bent by the curve of the shore. The sea ice heaved in slow, deliberate breaths, the way big animals do in sleep. Far off, the black seam of open water pulsed. "Hold," Briggs said, and put a gloved hand out. He crouched at the edge of the footprints and measured the last pace with his eyes. The line went right to the lip of the spit and kept going. Not onto thin ice, not toward a visible lead. The prints continued onto a pan of wind-scoured, hard-packed ice that looked more trustworthy than the floor in my kitchen. And then, 10 yards out, the impressions lightened from clear to ghosted to gone. We circled, the 3 of us, like ants, puzzled by their own scent. In the distance, a crack sounded, clean, like a rifle shot, and then the deeper timber of ice shifting under weight it didn't approve of. We didn't go out. There's a line between bravery and arithmetic. The arithmetic said no. We went back to the houses. We wrote times and temperatures and observations into notebooks because that's how you hold on to facts when story starts to itch at the edges. I checked for notes. Chalk marks, calendar entries, a scrap tacked to a door. In the sixth house, I found a piece of paper by the stove, weighed down by a spoon. Wind wrong. Drum on the ice last night. We go together. Don't let the stove go out. I don't like that we. It's a generous word. It spreads responsibility out until you can't tell who's carrying how much. Drum on the ice could mean the ice itself. When flows shift, they speak in drums and bells. You can feel it in your fillings. You could call it a voice if you wanted it to be one. We radioed in. Weather promised worse by night. Briggs wanted to mark each door with chalk, a simple inspector's X, so someone else wouldn't wonder if we'd checked. I built the kind of fire you make when you don't want warmth so much as company. The flame's sound kept the rooms from feeling nosy. At dusk, the wind died. Silence moved in like fog, slow, everywhere at once. With it came a sound that made the hair along my wrists lift inside my sleeves. It began low like the sea remembering something, then rose by degrees until it walked the line between note and knock. A drum, not a song, not a ritual. A pulse. One beat, then a longer beat, then silence timed to a human breath. We stepped onto the porch. The spit lay in a flat gray tongue. The sound came from past it. Not from the village, not from the houses, not from anything built by hands. The dogs that weren't there still felt present in their absence. I imagined them turning their heads in unison toward the sound, the way animals do when they agree on a threat before the humans do. Inside, Briggs said, not because he was afraid, but because he was respectful. We didn't sleep. We also didn't invent courage we couldn't spend. At first light, we packed the snowcat. I left a note weighted by the same spoon. We came. We'll come again. On the way out, I looked back over my shoulder at the chimneys. One still smoked. I pretended it was gratitude and not insult. We returned 2 days later with more machines, more people, a drone that hated the cold, and the kind of caution you learn after your first dozen rescues. The village had been busy in our absence. Doors we'd left ajar were closed. A chair we'd bumped now sat square to the table. The stove I'd fed had burned down to a blush and then out, as if it had kept its half of a bargain we hadn't meant to propose. We followed the footprints again. Fresh snow had fallen, laying a thin lace over the older impressions. The line still pointed the same way, out along the spit, onto the hard ice, to the spot where ice turns from friend to judge, and then nothing. Later back in town, I listened to a fisherman explain how sound travels through winter, how the right wind can take the call of a seal, the crack of a floe, the moan of distant water, and bend it into a thing with intention. He said sometimes it sounds like a drum, sometimes like a breath caught in the throat of the world. You hear it enough, he said, and you start to walk in rhythm. I don't pretend the sea took those people in one neat line like a ledger entry. I don't pretend it didn't. What I know is this: the houses were warm, the food was out, the boots were docked by doors like small, obedient boats. The chalk marks we left remained for the spring crew to see. And when I hear a winter drum, I keep my feet where the math approves, even when the story inside my head wants to make the beat mean something. If these stories follow you into the quiet, subscribe before the quiet gets there first. I'll keep the stove lit for the next one. 3 accounts. One sky that screams, one trail that ends where no man should stop, one village that chose a single direction. Maybe you hear patterns in them, maybe you don't. In Alaska, the land is too large to be comforted by answers. It offers us sounds and prints and warm rooms with no people in them, and we decide what kind of story we can live with. If you made it this far, thank you for spending your night here with Eerie Echoes. If you want more true horror told in a single, steady voice, stories from roads, oceans, mountains, and towns that prefer not to be found, subscribe to the channel. Tap the bell so you don't miss the next broadcast. And if tonight's tale stayed with you, drop a like and share this episode with someone who listens for drums in the wind. Until next time, keep your fire fed and don't follow footprints that don't come back.